Hi, folks. My name is Zaik, founder of the unfiltered, truth seeking, and incorruptible media platform Liberiat. Today's content is a discussion on the upcoming Australian referendum on 14 October, initiated by a proposal to introduce a community led council for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This will be known as The Voice. All right, friends. So, to start off, let's capture what a referendum is. For those learning, a referendum is a national vote to change our constitution, and our constitution is the foundation on which our systemic structure is based on. So, for example, in order to change standard legislation, Parliament can do this via the bill system, where someone proposes a request to introduce, amend, or abolish a law, and our respective lawmakers vote to pass or decline. With a constitution, this is embedded law, meaning the only way to change it is via a special vote called a referendum. Now, referendums are mandatory, therefore, all registered constituents of Australia must participate. And in order for a referendum to pass, it must result in a double majority, meaning both most Australian voters need to say yes, and so do 4 out of 6 states. Interestingly, the referendum isn't inclusive of our territories on a state level, which contains problematic exclusionary elements, and I'm going to explain why. One reason the elimination of territories from the state counter is a disadvantage for yes voters is that 1/3 of the Northern Territory are First Nations peoples, and the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, is an equality driven province of Australia. It definitely reeks of So, what exactly is the voice? A great deal of Australians are kind of worried the introduction of this official council for Indigenous communities could result in coerced legislative changes, a risk factor for negative consequences that could be targeted at non Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples. Now, some people are voting no for the polar opposite reason, which is that the council will possess no real power, and they're not wrong. Either way, the opposition is focusing more on the structural elements of the council rather than the potential and very possible benefits of including our Indigenous leaders in discussions around law which impacts their group directly. It seems quite natural to me, right? And I think to a lot of you as well. In my opinion, the opposition just sounds like another strong case of white people simply not wanting minorities to have a say on changes that impact their lives. With a quick search on voice.gov.au, and I need to ask, how many of you have actually checked the proposal via the official website rather than through biased media sources? I have. And the reason this is important is because in a couple of clicks, the following is outlined in black and white. The voice would make representations to the Parliament and executive government on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The members of the voice would be Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples and will be selected by their communities, not the government. So, to our First Nations friends worried about an unfair selection criteria or that simply the people being selected will be biased towards what the white government wants, I'll just let you know from now the council will be selected by you, and as far as we're aware, only you. Members will serve for a fixed period of time. And so this means that no one's there permanently. And they can be removed or sanctioned should they be accused and guilty of serious misconduct. So there's accountability as well, just like any other official position within government. To those of you worried about how much power they will have, let me just say it's quite minimum in reality, but nonetheless, it is a start. The Voice Council can make representations about improving programs or services, but will not manage money or deliver services themselves. So, to the concerned taxpayer, other than setting the group up and helping to fund research and involvement, which is already occurring, right? But I assume it will be a bit more centralized to the council moving forward. The voice simply will not be about sending special welfare payments to people or providing them with any special benefits that the media may portray its agenda to be. It's just not possible. The voice will have no veto power. Therefore, as mentioned before, friends, the authority to cause any major upheavals is lacking. So, for any of you feeling they could use their abilities for biased purposes, they legally can't. Australia, we are not the racist and apathetic beings our poisonous media portrays us to be. We are not blind to the reality that the Aboriginal people have come from a terrifying experience within our nation's history. We're not ignorant. We know that they don't live under the same standards as we do, and they haven't for a very long time. They are still the victims of racial profiling, especially by law enforcement. Their life expectancy is 10 years less than non Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people. Majority live in regional or remote areas, so their resources are limited. And this includes and isn't limited to health and disability care, just general government support services, social networking in general, and subtle continuation of displacement, which is rarely shown on media platforms, by the way. So, unless you follow Indigenous community groups, you're not going to see that they are being removed from their community organized areas of living. Their communities are still facing much higher rates of suicide, especially their younger generation, who are twice as likely to commit or end their life compared to a non-Indigenous person, which is honestly fucking scary and horrendous to hear. When I found that, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that's massive. Twice as likely. And we already have a massive issue with suicide in Australia anyhow, which is basically never talked about. It's okay to discuss the topic. It's not okay to discuss why our people seem to be suffering so immensely to the point that we are choosing that option. And it's a much higher statistic here than it is in a lot of other places of the world, right? But that's a whole other story for another day. Another issue is the Australian public perception that Aboriginal people don't contribute much to our economy, which is completely false because in a 2021 study, it was found that only 7.4% of First Nations peoples of working age, so between 15 to 64, were unemployed. That means most Indigenous people are employed and working and taxpayers, so they're giving something back to our nation. But we have this societal, this social view that they're just living off the dole and that they're doing, these natural living formats that involve not actually working or making money or giving something back. But there you go, the statistics are there: 7.4% unemployed. That means over 90% of our First Nations people are working and supporting this country. They are our friends. They are helping us maintain the peace that we have. And so, please, when we do talk about them, when we do vote on a decision that affects them, please don't do so with this false and toxic idea that they don't do anything for us and that they're detached. They're not. It's just a perception that they're detached, but they're not. And if you think about it, how many times do you walk out in public and go to a shopping center and do you see Indigenous people causing a ruckus or a crime? I honestly do not see something like that occur even just within our general, everyday general everyday scenarios. I just simply do not see this with most of our people. Yes, I see people argue. Sometimes I will see a parent being a little rough with their child, but this applies to all of us. It's never a case of, oh my gosh, all I see is one type of demographic constantly creating problems for everyone. But it's almost as though when it comes to our First Nations members, our instant thought process is that problematic. Drunks, drug addicts, abusive. But it's simply not true. It's just simply not true. Even if the statistics for their community around crime is higher, when we talk about our social interactions with their community on a daily basis, that perception is simply not true. The Voice isn't a special governance for something separate to our national community. It is to help support members within our community, members of this country, people who deserve to have some representation, because the lack of is causing their people to be impacted as a result of a predominantly white and racist government. We know Australia's politics is problematic. We don't like talking about it. Actually, we do. But our media, which is owned and represented by a lot of people with the same racist values, don't like to talk about it. So let's talk about it in this video. And let's talk about it in future content as well. Our perception that it's us versus them needs to end. And it needs to end with this referendum as well. This is why we need to vote yes. It was only up until 1967 that Indigenous people were considered human beings within our nation. It was up until the 1970s that Aboriginal children were removed from their homes forcibly, from healthy parents, from healthy environments, to be assimilated into white culture, which is just a very polite way of saying having another culture's ideology raped into their children, because that is literally what it is. And then to not have any semblance of their own culture, there are still people out there. There are still people out there today. Go on the internet, research it, looking for their family members that were forcibly removed when they were children. And that is just terrifying to think it is still an ongoing, occurring struggle. We are a new generation, and we are more educated. We are more inclusive. It does not matter what age range we come from. We have all been exposed to the same beautiful transformations as a community, collectively. And a lot of that is thanks to the internet. There's a ton of resources out there. We're not just limited to what our media is presenting on their platforms. We now have an opportunity to go out there and learn about other communities, learn about their struggles from unbiased sources. Please, if we could just not on this particular vote to start with, right, as a initiating point, not mimic the opinions of elitists, of wealthy corporations, of racist politicians like Pauline Hanson and One Nation. If we could just do our own research for a change, please go onto these community groups on Facebook, just type it on Google. The struggles of Indigenous people. Go on YouTube, you will see. It's so genuine and it's so heartbreaking. They are struggling. We're all struggling, but theirs is a unique injustice. And then base your decision off of those facts. But for once, my gosh, Australia, can we not vote as sheeple that are just blurting out the same bullshit of these assholes that just want us all to hate each other and fight with each other and then profit off of it? I'm voting yes, not particularly because I favour the Aboriginal community over others, or because I think that they suffer a lot more than I do. As in today, right now. I'm a trans woman. The world fucking detests my very existence. So this is not about feeling sorry for anyone, because I don't feel sorry for anyone. This is about advocating for equal rights in a way which I am not a hypocrite. Because when I started to defend equality, I made a promise that that extends to every community out there that needs to be supported, that needs to be focused on in order to undo or to overcome an unfair trouble that they are facing. I don't know what's going to happen with this vote, and it is looking pretty bad. But I can say this: no matter what happens, to my First Nation friends, you are not alone. And regardless of what the outcome is, there are going to be those of us who will continually support you, who will continually try to the best of our capacity to remain educated about your culture, about your existing struggles, past, present, future, and to help where possible. Thank you for listening. Australia, make the right fucking choice. Vote yes.